Now, we are reunited with Jennifer Victor, professor of political science at George Mason University. Jennifer, you were sitting with us outside the Capitol in Washington, D.C. when Trump was being inaugurated on January 20th. I'm keen to get your take on his first 100 days. You're now joining us from Fairfax, Virginia. Welcome back. In Minneapolis is Amy Koch, Republican political strategist. Amy, you were also with us in D.C. during Inauguration Week. Welcome back to you as well. Jennifer, it feels, I say it feels, like the U.S. is a different country today from when you and I last spoke on January 20th. Am I overreacting?
Not according to the data that I look at. It's great to be with you again, Cyril. You know, there can be a difference between the way that experts apply numbers to understand social situations and political situations, as I do in my job. There can be a difference between what the numbers tell us and how people feel about it. But to your point about feeling like things are different now, a lot of the analysis that we use to describe what a regime is like, the status, the quality of a regime, the characteristics of a style of government, suggests that the United States has experienced significant democratic backsliding under the second Donald Trump administration, to the point where some analysts would call the United States what's known as a competitive authoritarian regime rather than a democratic regime at this point. And I honestly, I don't know how helpful the labels are. I do think it's quite helpful to understand where some of that is coming from, which I imagine we'll get into a bit.
Amy, you're a political strategist, so hypothetical here. Imagine you are Donald Trump's chief of staff, and you're looking at this landscape, right? 100 days into this second term. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I think you're feeling a little mixed. I think on immigration, I think you're feeling like you've, done exactly what you came in and said you were going to do. The illegal border crossings that were unmanageable under Biden, by their own definition, are now down to a trickle. So I think that you've got that. I think that, frankly, Ukraine, Israel, NATO, I think you're feeling pretty good about what's been happening, on an international stage in a lot of ways. You came in there and did what you said. I think when it comes to the economy, you're very concerned, and should be, because and ultimately, I think in the end, the American people vote largely on how their pocketbooks are feeling. And so as you go into the next, half of this year and into the midterms for next year, you need to see this economy improve. And given the sort of up and down, and we have tariffs and we don't have tariffs, and all those promises made, from day one, inflation will be down. Those numbers are just not playing out. And so as that hypothetical chief of staff, I would be very concerned about that.
Amy, you know what? This is great because you're running down the checklist, and that's exactly what I wanted to engage both you and Jennifer with. So let's listen to a few things, more than a few things, that Donald Trump had to say on Inauguration Day.
The golden age of America begins right now. I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. I will direct all members of my cabinet to marshal the vast powers at their disposal to defeat what was record inflation. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier.
Okay, so there you heard it. Immigration, peacemaking, the economy, inflation, those are the main things that Donald Trump promised. We're going to sort of keep checking with Jennifer and Amy how he's doing, like try and establish a scorecard. Jennifer, on immigration, do you agree with Amy that he has kept his promise? The question is not, do you agree with the policy? Do you agree? The question is, do you agree that he has kept his promise?
Yeah, so there's no question that immigration was a top issue during the campaign, and an issue that many voters cared about, and that one of the big concerns was about the border. And largely because of the policies and the downstream effects of those policies, which has sort of instituted a lot of uncertainty and fear for a lot of folks, means that the border crossings, the illegal border crossings that we've been having a lot of trouble with over the last decade or so in the United States, have really, as as Amy said, gone down to a trickle. And so in terms of checking boxes, that box is checked. The more problematic side and where the public opinion numbers are reflecting that even on immigration, Donald Trump is facing some political headwind, even among his own supporters, is that people are not so certain about deporting people without due process. And there's been a lot of controversy, a lot of specific cases that have gotten a lot of public attention, suggesting that Americans may not be on board with assuming that people are criminals and taking them out of the country without having a judicial process that adjudicates that. And claims of innocent people and American citizens and sick children. And all of this is pretty bad press for the president. And so I think that's what we are seeing reflected in some of those not so great numbers for him on immigration, despite the success on the border crossings issue.
But so Amy, I sometimes feel like Trump has somehow magically discovered the political invulnerability potion. I mean, I know his poll numbers aren't great, but it also seems like he's just used to navigating in these waters with average to below average poll numbers. And he's faced so much politically, whether it's impeachments, whether it's criminal conviction, all variety of scandals. It feels like he can't do anything worse in the eyes of his critics than he's already done, and that gives him a free hand to kind of do and say anything now.
Well, I don't know about that. And I think where he's running into trouble is a little bit to this. So the first 100 days of a presidency goes back to FDR, and it really wasn't about FDR's 100 days. He named 100 days of Congress, right? He said, we have 100 days to get this work done, the path that he laid forward. And it's notable that this president has not passed a single initiative through Congress. It has been all on his own. He's cowboy, right? He's off on his own doing all of this. And that allows him to sort of do whatever he wants in an authoritarian way, but he doesn't come with any buy-in. Whether it's the deportations without due process, whether it's tariffs, which I think universally people across the political spectrum have deep concerns about, whether it's the DOJ, government efficiencies, and having folks, looking into and access to some, to a lot of high level security coded places of our government. He doesn't have the buy-in there. He's been doing that just willy-nilly as he goes. And I think that is where he gets into trouble, and it's reflected in his numbers. And it's also where he gets a lot of pushback from the government, from the American people in general. And so that is, I think, where I think overall, that's kind of like the big failure of this first 100 days.
So, Jennifer, this is something, this is in line with sort of how you started this conversation about when you mentioned authoritarianism. And again, I know you said maybe the labels aren't accurate, so we don't have to stick to those words. But Amy is saying, and this feels so relevant, that he doesn't have buy-in for what he's doing because he's doing everything through executive action. I want to make sure our viewers understand this. Donald Trump has signed five bills into law, which is very little, fewer than any president in their first 100 days. And on the flip side, as we said earlier in the show, he has signed more executive actions than any other president. An executive action is a piece of paper the president signs. He says, I want to do X, Y, Z. He signs it. And if it's more or less within his powers, he can do it. It's not a law. That's why Amy's saying there's no buy-in. From your political science professor point of view, can you just can you explain that for our viewers? Explain the importance of it?
Yeah, what we've seen over the last 100 days is a really profound concentration of power in the executive, in the presidency itself, largely due to what you're explaining there nicely, Cyril, which is all the policy changes that he has wanted to enact, he has not done through Congress. He has a majority control. His party has majority control in Congress. Honestly, I'm not sure how much that matters because he's not using Congress for any of the things he wants to do. He's doing it all through this process known as executive orders and other types of executive actions. Executive orders do have the force of law, but they can be overturned by Congress, which is something we would typically see that would happen in lots of administrations. But rather what Donald Trump is doing is concentrating power in the executive, which, to be fair, that is a trend, sort of abdicating congressional power to the executive branch. That is a trend we have seen in the United States over the last maybe even 100 years, but particularly in the last 30 or so. So continuing the trend is not unusual, but what is unusual is just how steep that difference in how much power he is concentrating, all of that executive action. So we can compare him to other types of leaders that have come into power, sometimes very legitimately through elections, as Donald Trump did, but then participated in significant democratic backsliding. You know, you can look at Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. You could go back to Pinochet in Chile a long time ago. You could look at others that are more dictatorial style regimes, and what he is doing seems to be on those on the same kind of grounds.
All right, Jennifer Victor, Amy Koch, thank you very much to both of you. I have to run, but thank you so much for making time for us on a day like today.
Thank you.